Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar, Driving Industrial Digitalization in the 5G Era, presented by Huawei Technologies. My name is Joan, and I'll be opening and closing today's webinar. We have a remarkable panel of speakers who we will introduce in a moment. You can read their full bios on the left side of your window by selecting the Speakers tab. Just a few notes before we begin. If you need closed captions, you can access those from the bottom right corner of the video player. This webinar is being recorded, so you will have access and be able to watch on demand within 24 hours after we conclude today's session. We would love to hear from you. During the presentation, if you have any questions, you can submit them at any time using the Q&A tab, question and answers tab on the left side of your screen. And time permitting, we will conclude with a Q&A session and the speakers will cover as many as they can. All right, we're ready to begin. Moderating this webinar and introducing our panel is Alejandro Pinero, Head of Content at Fierce Wireless Questex. Alejandro, please go ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joan. And I have to agree, this is a great panel. I'm very much looking forward to hearing all about industrial 5G from these experts. So, as Joan mentioned at the top, my name is Alejandro Pinheiro. I'm the head of content here at Fierce Wireless. And I've been looking forward to this session for a little while. So, very happy to finally be with you today. Now, I'm going to allow here the panelists to introduce themselves. I think they'll do much more justice to their impressive background and what they're up to than I would. So let me allow everyone here to answer a question first while they speak about their focus and why they're interested in industrial 5G. So I'd love to, panelists, just hear a little bit about what you think industrial 5G is or what it means to you as you introduce yourself. So why don't we start here with Mohammed. Mohammed Madkour is the VP for Global Marketing and Solution Sales for the Carrier Networks division over at Huawei. Mohammed, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Alejandro, and thank you all. Very happy to be in the panel addressing a very exciting topic. I belong to Huawei Global Carrier Network Business Group, working on solutions, connectivity, economics globally, how to make it attractive and valuable to all organizations and consumers and everybody. The focus has been on, of course, 5G, cloud, AI, which to me, actually, to answer your question, Alejandro, to me, those are key foundational attractive tools for transformation for enterprise. But what those mean to me, if I am an organization leader or owner, is that it will make me more productive. It will make the work environment safer, greener, happier for people, more productive even for my customers. So in very simple words, it just makes things better to cope with the challenges that we all having these days. So looking forward to discussion.
Excellent. Thank you, Mohammed. And we'll go into some depth about all those topics, I'm sure, over the next hour. Let me then introduce here Chetan Sharma. He's the CEO of Chetan Sharma Consulting. He's joining us from Seattle. Chetan, same question. Welcome to the webinar. Tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. Thanks a lot, and great to be with my friends and colleagues on this discussion of 5G. My background is in wireless. I've been in the industry for about 30 years, working on strategy and products over that cycle. And over the last 25 years or so, I've been running a strategy consulting firm, helping players in the ecosystem around the world, and have written a number of books and papers kind of discussing and brainstorming ideas, and that we'll discuss today. The way I kind of think about 5G is in a continuum of how things have progressed over the last 30, 40 years. And so if you think about the internet cycle where computers and internet transformed the enterprises, and we then, over the last 15 or so odd years, we had the cycle of LTE, where LTE, cloud, and smartphones really changed how enterprises do their task automation. And I think we are supercharging that effort of task automation with the help of 5G in this current cycle, where it's not only just 5G, but other technologies like AI, edge computing, blockchain, and so on and so forth. And so it's a continuum of more rich tools that are being made available to the enterprises for the tasks they were not able to do before. And that's what's exciting about 5G.
Excellent, thank you, Chetan. And finally, on the panel, last but not least, of course, we have Winston Ma, adjunct professor at NYU School of Law, but very much involved in the past in technology from an investment fund perspective. So, Winston, welcome to the webinar. Great to have you here. And if you could also share a few thoughts with us here to open things up.
Yeah, thank you very much. I started as an undergrad in semiconductor physics and then also a computer science minor. But after that, I had a 10-year Wall Street lawyer banker journey in New York City, where I'm in. And after that, I had another 10-year as the managing director, head of America for CIC, China's sovereign wealth fund, right, for global investing, including tech investing in the Silicon Valley. And now I mostly focus funds and the digital infrastructure. And I published a series of books about tech investing, sovereign capital and the digital infrastructure. And for that, 5G is a very big topic. And the way I think about 5G is Earth computing. And certainly I use the term Earth computing because we have been in the cloud computing last couple of years, right? And I actually have seen tremendous growth in the cloud computing. But cloud computing itself cannot handle all the connectivity and the data traffic that the next generation internet will generate and use, right? I use the term Earth computing for 5G because it involves more physical objects, right? More physical world. The connectivity hardware, right? Alexander, and Mohammed, can definitely chat more about the Huawei offering in that space, and also you have all the Internet of Things and new sensors, smart devices, right? And then finally, the physical environment that people like you and me will be operated from, right? Whether it's a port or hospital or event venue. Maybe next time we do it in a more 5G powered offline merge with online venue or even just your home, right? So a lot more physical connectivity there. And I think that's where 5G will play a big role to complement cloud computing.
Absolutely. I love that. Earth computing. That's great. All right. Well, thank you to our panelists here for that introduction. I think, our attendees will agree with me that we have a great breadth and experience and different angles to discuss 5G. Joan mentioned it at the top, but just a quick reminder, as we go along, I have some questions here for our panelists, but we are on the lookout on the Q&A tab here just to make sure that we get your questions in as well. So that makes the webinar, of course, very much relevant to you as well. All right, so the way I'd like to discuss over the next hour or so is first to set the scene of where we are. Then we can talk about some of the key drivers that are getting 5G and industrial 5G, enterprise 5G out there. And finally, what's coming down the pipeline. So let's start at the beginning. Let's start with setting the scene a little bit. And for that, I'd like to call on you, Chetan, just to give us a little bit of a perspective of where we are today when it comes to those industrial 5G deployments. What are some of the key trends you're observing, and anything to keep in mind to inform the discussion ahead?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So, if you look at the cycle of 5G, we are already probably 40% into that cycle, just coming over about 4-year anniversary of the 5G launches around the world. And so what we see is an extremely fast deployment compared to any other cycle that we have seen before. at least 3 to 4 times faster than the last cycle, which we thought was pretty fast, the LTE cycle. And so as a result, we are seeing much deeper penetration with all sorts of devices in the ecosystem, much faster than anything we have seen before. So what does that mean? We have close to a billion, or over a billion subscribers. But in the enterprise context, enterprises are looking at a way to increase the broadband reliability that they have in their respective environments, whether it's factories or ports or stadium, educational institutes, and so on and so forth. And also take advantage of some of the new capabilities like lower latency, um, higher security, private networks, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of the foundation. You have a layer of 5G, then you build private networks and edge computing on top, and then you have all sorts of applications and services that you can design. And what enterprises are doing around the globe is starting with some of the low-hanging fruit, meaning they're doing private networks and edge compute first, laying the foundation so that they can do more sophisticated things like computer vision in manufacturing, or safety compliance in ports, or streaming in holographic imagery in sports stadiums, and so on and so forth. And so once the robust underlying platform is there, then you move on to the next level. And this is not theoretical. It's people are already generating tremendous value, and the participants in the ecosystem are generating billions and billions of dollars around the globe.
Sure. Yeah, there's definitely a huge opportunity there. Now, Mohammed and Winston, perhaps we can start with you, Mohammed. I know that you were both over at MWC Shanghai just a few weeks ago. Big showcase there in terms of different applications for industrial 5G. Mohammed, what are some of the key elements perhaps that have been driving 5G adoption for these enterprises? What are your clients or prospective partners telling you about that's driving them to invest in 5G?
There are two sides or two angles to answer this question. Well, the first angle is, I think Chetan already talked about it, which is from the enterprise perspective. They are looking for different things. Well, I can summarize it actually that basically they wanted to do more for less and do it better. Do it in a higher quality, doing it in a higher reliability, doing it in a greener way, doing it in a better quality. So that's the essence actually of transformation, and that's what they are looking forward to do with, as I said, to cope with the economic challenges that we're all suffering from it, more or less, no matter which country or which region. So that's the essence of transformation for enterprise. Now, when they are looking to do that, as I mentioned, they have to leverage the key fundamental and foundational technologies in there. And the 5G actually has been so attractive generation of technology. It's actually, you can say that this is the first generation of mobile technology that deals with that specific segment in a really deeper and broader scope. So 5 angles about 5G. First of all, it's a very global, unified standard that's been developed by great scientists all over the world. And number 2, the broader and deeper and deterministic experience attributes in 5G, no matter from the speed or latency or reliability or positioning accuracy, those can be monetized and used in the enterprise and provide values to the enterprise as well as the employee as well as the customer. Add to that the efficiency of 5G as a technology, no matter in the cost per bit, which is not really relevant for enterprise, it's relevant for consumer, but also for the energy consumed per bit. It's the greener aspect, the spectral efficiency, evolution capability of 5G. Later, I think we will address the 5G advance. Last but not least, I would like to stress and double click on the ecosystem, the strong ecosystem that's been developed by 5G. Now I can tell you there are more than 300,000 industrial terminals connected by 5G. There are more than 300 types of industrial modules, more than 80 or 100, I think, manufacturing modules. So those are, I guess, from different vendors and OEMs all over the world, will give us a very big, integrated, wide ecosystem for any enterprise that wanted to deploy that. They will find this catalog and they will pick that. So those are, I think, the drivers that I've been seeing from 5G that make it really as an attractive from both technology capability, commercial viability, and also ecosystem integrity.
Sure. No, and Winston, jumping on that point, right, that Mohammed's making about it being a global solution. Now, of course, you're based in New York, but you have experience in China, been traveling the world. What, how does that translate? What have you been seeing that's caught your eyes in terms of 5G applications?
Exactly. From the driver perspective, China is a great point. Is a great case study because the drivers in China come from both the users and the government, pushing the businesses to go forward with 5G adoption, which is very interesting. Right? On the user side, it's the C2B, meaning that the users' digital activities actually drive the businesses adoption of new technologies such as 5G, right? So if you look at the last decade, for 4G mobile internet, right, the Chinese internet population leapfrogged into the smartphone era, and for the Chinese internet population, they have used a smartphone, mobile payment, facial recognition, so on and so forth, way earlier than the businesses started to adopt them, right? So the users started and the business followed, and the same is true for 5G and the new generation internet. The users are very much into, let's say, more high quality video, cloud gaming, so on and so forth, right? So, but the businesses are starting. So they have to look into the user's behavior and then adapt their platforms to be more powerful to enable the new users. So it's like technology to B to C development we see, in Chinese gaming companies, for example. Then another part is the government push, right? The Chinese government recognized that the digital economy is not just about the internet companies, right? It's about the whole economy. So they recognized that the digital infrastructure will be a powerful enabler for the whole economy, right? So that's why during the COVID-19 pandemic, right, China's stimulus package was mostly into so-called new infrastructure, right? Instead of going into toll roads, express highways, that type of traditional infrastructure, right? During the COVID, the new infrastructure stimulus package went into cell towers, 5G networks, and the data centers, right? So I think the users' behavior as well as the government infrastructure investments are big drivers for the 5G development in China.
Yeah, great. And Mohammed, you mentioned those 300,000 terminals, right? You mentioned a lot of these applications. Do you have any particular sectors that we should shout out here that are using 5G effectively? I've heard a lot about mining, transportation. I don't know if there's any that, from Huawei's perspective, you've been seeing A, success, but B, also just that impetus and investment needed to make it work.
Yeah, so it's very obvious, actually, if you look at the numbers. When it comes to China, I think the size of the investment in private network last year was about more than, I guess, $1.4 billion. And that number, I think, this year is going to be maybe even triple. Even, I believe, GSA numbers, when it comes to the number of global outside China private network, has been doubled last year. So, and Huawei is not really different from all over, from what other sectors and what other vendors are seeing, actually. We're seeing a lot of demand pushed again by those values that are expected and are being already offered to enterprise. And you mentioned, of course, those are the key sectors in the center stage. We're talking about port, mining, manufacturing, you name it. Those are from campus network kind of view. I guess if you give me like 1 minute to give you how we sectorize things, like from the 5G for enterprise, you can go as simple as private line to CCTV cameras, to enterprise, to maybe to a construction site. We have had that in Europe, like extending private line to football game, for example, or to construction site. So those are, I would say, the massive connectivity of, you can consider it 5G to enterprise. Well, the second part would be on wide area private network when it comes to serving certain areas by wide area connectivity. For example, smart city. We've seen a lot of that all over the world. We are building a smart city with our partners globally. But the really key fun and key innovative applications, I would say, in the campus network, for example, manufacturing. I wanted to mention an example who's one of the leading appliance manufacturing in China. It's called the Media Group. This company now is transforming itself as a global leading, fully leveraging 5G in all of its factories for industrial operation, as well as business operation as well, industrial production and business operation. They cut the inventory actually that they have to about 50% after they digitalized and used 5G, the power of 5G, to replace all of the complex cabling between products line and stuff, connecting about 15 scenarios inside the factory, from quality inspection to operational and production and product lines. I heard a very funny number. It took them, I think, 15 seconds to deliver a washing machine from the product line to the consumer. So these kind of numbers are really nice. Not only that, they cut actually the number of labor by 30%. And now we get to a very tricky point where people say, well, 5G will make people out of the job. I would say no, because you cut the number of people in those production area. However, you convert those blue-collar workers into white-collar workers, expanding other technology, upskill. So a lot of success in this. In mining, we've had a lot of success in mine. In mining, it's really social responsibility. Reducing any technology that reduces the number of people underground or even in a surface mine, it's actually really fundamentally important, reducing the number of accidents. We've had a very nice application very recently with one of our mines of having panoramic view of all of the mine service, stitching up to 100 videos together and using our own Pango foundational machine learning algorithm. In detecting on that panoramic view, you can detect if anything goes wrong, if anything that tells you that there is something wrong is going to happen, and then you can prevent it. That's one of the applications. The last application that's very cool, actually, with the steel factories. In steel factories, the temperature in the workshop goes up to 50 and 70 degrees. And at some point of time, the workers need to get closer to those iron and steel in order to do things. So imagine if you automate things and prevent those workers from getting closer. That's also a lot of cool stuff. We developed something we called Cloud Eye, in which it detects actually the solid waste, identify the solid waste in the air. Cloud-based operation, like quality inspection and operation. So different areas, different sectors have different innovation, and that's the key in 5G. I think sky's the limit for the amount of innovative application. I think it just needs the desire of the company, and also the passion and the experience of a company like Huawei, moving the expertise globally from this country to this country, from this area to that area. I think that's cool. I'm very excited actually about that.
Great. Yeah, I'm sure it's very valuable to have that partnership with a company that has that experience already under its belt. While we get Winston here set up again, Chetan, if I could ask you something that's coming through here. We've obviously been talking about the impact of 5G for those industrial enterprises, right? So what some of those key benefits and success looks like for them. Now, we just had a question come in to talk about more about the mobile operator's role in this, right? So before we talk about what's next, I just want to also give the chance to discuss how mobile operators can have that can have a role to play. And the other part of the question, which I thought was interesting as well, is, in your experience, is this a play for just the big carriers, or is there a bigger ecosystem there that can make the most of these opportunities?
Sure. Naomi, great question. So, the way operators have been thinking about 5G is initially obviously basic connectivity, but the real generation of new revenue will come from what I call the fourth wave, meaning a new set of services and applications that the ecosystem will develop. And we saw that in LTE cycle as well. And the value shifted from the connectivity layer up to the applications and services, and 5G will be no different. And so the way operators are benefiting, the ones who have that strategy in place, is by building expertise on the platform layer, building expertise by vertical in the applications and services space. And so if you do that, you are able to capture a bigger share of the value created by 5G. It's not just providing connectivity, but the kind of the full stack of any given solution in a given industry. Mohammed laid out some wonderful examples of things that are happening today, have been happening for some years. Now, how do operators capture that? One thing, obviously, basic connectivity, but how do you provide, say, a platform for worker safety compliance? Then how do you build on top of it to provide that as a managed service, to actually build applications specific to, say, mining or manufacturing or to other vertical industries? And so the more operators participate in that whole stack, the bigger revenue share they will see. And we're seeing that with number of operators, global operators around the world. Now the question is, how do smaller operators participate in this dynamic? And there the strategy becomes slightly different. They clearly do not have the resources that the big operators have to build these platforms or build these application services. And so I think partnership becomes extremely important, where through either collaboration with other smaller operators or even larger operators within the country or otherwise, or with the vendor community, they build a platform that is more self-serve than kind of handhold based system integration that typically is needed. And so depending on the vertical, they will have to have a portfolio or a catalog of solutions that they can target and go after that specific industry. But they will still have to invest in building the capability within the organization, in sales, in engineering, and in troubleshooting, so that they can address things how enterprises would like them to be addressed when something goes wrong, or they need to have a roadmap built. And so both large and small operators can participate in this, are participating in this, but requires a different strategy shift as they go about executing on strategy around 5G.
Yeah, and if I may, Alejandro, I want to comment also, because I like the last point that Chetan mentioned about how the vendor community can also help on that, because I believe there is a role from the vendor community that they need to play on top of just providing the infrastructure equipment solution. And this is actually what Huawei is actually what we were trying to do actually, is how to provide certain value and looking at the service that our customers wanted to provide, and then make that service, providing that service as a goal from our perspective. Like, we help our carriers from different aspects along the cycle of deployment of 5G to be services, starting from customer consultation, because maybe they don't know what is it that those sectors need in terms of transformation. And we have teams in the company at Huawei to look at that, helped by also our public cloud platform, implementing platform as a service and putting those tools in there. So that's from customer consultation, but also from the solution design. Like one simple example, I always say we're always learning at Huawei. Like 5-6 years ago, I talked about steel factory. When we started to put the network inside the steel factory, we figured out that the network is really bad. That there is the communication is not good. And the reason with that, we went back that the tools that we're using to design the network outdoors, it does not valid inside the steel factory because of the reflection. So we ended up doing another tool for the design of the network just for the steel factory. So this is the learning curve. So customer consultation, solution design, and also commercialization, how they can go to market. I think a go to market from the service that the enterprise would build, that the operator will build to the enterprise, is fundamentally important. But the last and the key point at the end is operation and maintenance. And that's an extra service that the operator need to offer. So what we do is that we empower the operator, we give them the tool to manage and optimize their captivated network. And the operator can choose to give it to the enterprise so that the enterprise will carry the responsibility and the talent and the skill to run their network. So these are also very important angle when it comes to helping how the vendor can help operators, and then operators that can be a key player in terms of enabling this kind of segment for global economy to be much better, and for the leadership of the countries as well.
Excellent. Yeah, that's. I mean, that case study of the steel reflection is fascinating, and it just goes to show how the only way you get this right is by going out there and doing things and figuring it out. So
exactly.
I think that's a very valuable point to raise, and for folks that are watching to keep in mind, because there's going to be unexpected challenges. So I think we've got Winston back, but before I go to him, Mohammed, I'm going to pick on you again. But we've been spending, we spent half the webinar here talking about what's going on. So let's think ahead now. I've been hearing some on 5.5G. Of course, as a telecom industry, we're always talking about what next, whether it's marketing or tech. We're always thinking about what's next and what's going on. So when it comes to industrial 5G, what does 5.5G mean? I mean, I guess it wouldn't be a webinar on tech if we don't talk about AI or machine learning or, greater throughput capability, whatever it might look like. So can you maybe, for someone like me, dumb it down and tell me what's in the pipeline from a tech perspective for enterprises when they're looking ahead at these 5G deployments and from a Huawei company, huge R&D capability. What are you guys working on that you can share?
Sure. So again, Chetan mentioned that the 4G was the enabler of the previous cycle. So I would say that the triggering point for the transformation for this cycle is AI and machine learning, as you mentioned. And what we see that the computing power is going up and up and up. I think this entry point to the true intelligent world, and everything is about AI in terms of the parameters, the size, the computing power, and everything, will mandate much better connectivity again, and the much better needed is that we need to supersize the capability of the 5G. So we set that vision for upgrading or supersizing the capability of 5G about 3 years ago, and 3GPP standard actually already standardized what they call 5G Advanced. Huawei, we call it 5.5G, but naming doesn't matter. So basically, the standard will be frozen, I believe, the beginning of next year, and you can see commercialization actually of that part next year, 2024. But why do we need it? I mean, still with all of the great stuff that's happening in 5G, there is still experience gap, and there are still some scenario gaps when it comes to covering all of those great use cases of 5G. I can give you an example on the mining exercise or business that we have with our partners. They wanted uplink speed up to 1 point something gigabit per second. In actually the media appliance group, they needed 1 gigabit per second in every 1,000 square meter. So how to get to that great uplink capacity, I think that's what is needed when it comes to 5.5G or 5G advanced release 18 and 19 of 3GPP comes to play to enhance this kind of speed. But that's not all. I believe the key about 5.5G is some key scenarios that are added. I would mention to you the scenario of reduce the capability in 5.5G, and reduce the capability meaning that I get those devices in a more low, cheaper, of course, more ubiquitous, less power consumption, and a little bit less capability. It is actually, we call it less capability, but actually it has great capability as compared to LTE Cat 4 capability, for example. So those will cover things like drones, for example, with a very effective way. The thing that I'm really excited about in 5.5G is the passive IoT. Passive IoT is basically those little tags that you can attach to every thing that you want, no matter clothes, no matter boxes, and anything physical that you need, that used to have RFID in terms of scanning of those things in 10 meters away. Now you have those tags. They don't have battery, and they use the same 5G network or 5G advanced network, and they do automatic inventory and stuff. So I personally believe that the space of only that thing of passive IoT will go beyond 100 billion connectivity in the next few years. And the price for this tag is supposed to be cents, like 10 cents or something. No battery needed. So those are the things. Add to it the big elephant in the room, the sensing capability. So we used to have the 5G network only for communication. Now you use the same 5G advanced network for both communication and sensing, trying to sense, those people that are breaking into your backyard, trying to sense even in the air, like integrating land, sea, and air, with a whole ubiquitous, comprehensive, holistic network that gives you values. So again, 5G advanced is coming naturally, upgrading 5G capability for really great business opportunity. It is not something that is meant to change things that are happening. It is just the milestone that will give us fulfill the full promise that 5G has already promised on having a fully connected, intelligent world.
Excellent. Lots to unpack there. Let me just check with Winston if he can hopefully hear us now. Winston,
Yeah. Hi,
excellent.
Alexandro. Yes.
Awesome. Yeah. So Winston, I wanted you to maybe build on that answer. I know you carefully follow AI and its impact on everything we're talking about here. How does AI help build on what we are seeing already out there with 5G? How do you think it will, help with integration and development of these enterprise and industrial grade 5G deployments?
Yeah, sure, Alexander. Maybe it's time for New York to have 5G networks, right? So it won't drop off. And maybe this is why AT&T stock dropped to multi-year low last week. The connectivity is not there. But anyway, so back to the question about AI, IoT, right? I fully agree with my colleague's comments. AI and IoT developments will be a big driver for 5G networks. Because that demands a lot of edge computing or earth computing, you might term. Because for one thing, right, the current AI is all in the past tense, meaning we mostly train AI models based on existing data from the past, right? So for industrial applications, for wired digitalized factories, right? We hope to have AI process in real time or near real time data from a factory floor, right? So for that, you can imagine IoT and 5G will play together to create powerful AI applications in real time and in real context, right? So that's one. And another one is about customized computing for AI. Because AI is a highly compute intensive process, it is critical
to have the right infrastructure optimized, right, for the unique demands of AI workloads at the edge. And this relates to more efficient energy consumption that Mohammed already covered. And it may also help like a data security, data privacy, right? Provide more secure data usage, on the edge, right? Instead of in the cloud, etc. Therefore, AI development, IoT development will drive edge computing, and for that, 5G will play a critical role in the years to come.
Brilliant. And I guess to close the loop here with Chetan, would you agree? What are some of these key drivers that Mohammed and Winston have touched on in terms of what will be driving further industrial 5G deployments over the next couple of years?
Sure. Just a quick comment on AI. I think there is some misconception, maybe a misconception in the industry that AI is something new to the wireless ecosystem. My first job 30 years ago was doing AI in 1G networks. And so wireless industry has been doing AI for a really, really long time. And even with 4G, 5G, AI is embedded in how traffic is managed. I think what is exciting is offering the network capability to enterprises and other participants in the ecosystem. And so you offer this capability of digital twinning to enterprises and factories and ports, where they can essentially replicate the physical with a digital replica and do all sorts of real-time use case scenarios as to how they want to run a factory or anticipate any troubles that might happen in a factory, I think, as Mohammed also alluded to. But I think also having this effective real estate that operators have in base stations to be a computing platform, not just a communication platform. And that offers tremendous potential in terms of the surge in compute demand that is required in some of these enterprise scenarios, whether it's mining or manufacturing, or even hospitals. Like hospitals are generate just terabytes and terabytes of data per hour. And how do you really analyze it in a real-time fashion, and not hours and days and weeks and months later, but in real time to provide a better understanding of what the physicians are seeing or may not be seeing, and provide that feedback loop back to the physicians in an operating room, for instance, is tremendously beneficial. Or aggregating the data that's coming out across multiple hospitals around the world to really understand the trends and help in, again, task automation within that environment. And so as you think about 5.5G or 5G Advanced, passive IoT that Mohammed mentioned, RedCap, location accuracy. And so as soon as you get your location accuracy from meters to centimeters to millimeters, your ability to increase your output in completely autonomous functions where robots are performing, as well as where humans and robots are working together, the output goes higher. And that's why I think the environment of tools becomes extremely rich for enterprises to play with in terms of how they use these new tools. On the roadmap, they're already on. They already have this 5G connectivity in these respective places. And so how do they take advantage and further build out, I can now do millimeter accuracy of things that are in my environment, whether it's ports or manufacturing facilities or warehouses, and increase the output or increase efficiency or decrease error rates and things like that. And so that whole continuum of how technology progresses is what I think enterprises are looking at.
Yeah. And before, we're getting quite a lot of questions here from the audience, which is great. So please keep sending those through. Before we go into those, I just wanted to go to Winston one more time to make a bit of use of his background on the finance angle. We've been hearing a lot of these great advances in tech, moving into greater accuracy, a lot of use cases. From an investment perspective, is this what's going to drive investment? Do you think that enterprises and investors need more? Are we there in terms of with the business case and the returns? Is it a proven model? And would you feel comfortable if you were in an investment fund to look at 5G services for the enterprise you'd be involved in this hypothetical case?
Yes, it's a great question because it is a new asset class. Like if you think from the perspective of a financial market person, it's sort of like infrastructure investments, but it also, for example, a 5G network or a cloud service infrastructure, right? It's sort of similar to traditional infrastructure investments, like a road, like a airport, like a cell tower, right? But at the same time, it has equity component there, right? Because the technology could be disrupted in a few years, right? And also it is subject to the ultimate application users. So for the capital markets, people need to find ways to get comfortable with this concept as new infrastructure. And if you look at the China example, actually the government capital is leading the way, which makes a lot of sense, right? Because when we're talking about a long-term project with payout to come in after a long time, that it is good for the government capital to get in and to set up a foundation, and then the more nimble capital, the capital markets capital will come in, feeling that some of the projects, especially the long-term projects, are more or less de-risked, so to speak, right? Now let's put this into context again, using the last decade 4G as example, right? China puts a lot of effort, and maybe the best effort in the world to develop the 4G infrastructure in China, right? But up until today, right, you can guess what's the percentage of the population that gets the basic internet connectivity, right? And I give you the answer very quickly. Actually, it's just about 70%. Okay, so it took China many years of intensive 4G investments, and then right now 70% of the population has basic internet connectivity. But that means we still have a few hundred millions of people in China do not even have basic internet, right? And we're talking about China. So putting this into the global context, right? There are many areas that are remote, hard to get to, where construction costs will be very high, and for this, the government capital will be the leading capital, and we see this not only in China but also in other emerging markets, right, such as Middle East, led by Saudi, or Southeast Asia countries like Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, right? The sovereign funds there are leading the effort to build up the basic digital infrastructure, and with that, the projects after that will be much more de-risked. And then you will see a lot more capital markets capital going in there.
Excellent. Right. Well, let's use the remaining 10 or so minutes here to jump into some of these questions that have come in. There's quite a few, so apologies in advance if we don't get to all of them, but I'm sure the team will address them at another time as well. But let me, on the trend of what's next, and Mohammed, let's go to you here. But I mentioned before, it wouldn't be a tech webinar we didn't talk about AI. It definitely wouldn't be a telco webinar we didn't talk about 6G. So you've mentioned the next standards coming in. Does 6G play a role in this? Is it just a bit of a
I think 6G has already played a role.
Exactly. See, we lost Alejandro. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I don't know if you heard the question there, but yeah.
Yeah. I kind of heard it.
Yeah, it's all about 6G. What's coming up? We've talked about the next standards, but what's good with 6G?
once I detect a 6G word in any question, so I only have one answer. I don't know. No. Well, I guess right now the 6G is in the visionary or vision stage. And we all know that historically it takes about 10 years to go from vision to commercialization. So 10 years, I would say. So we're looking at to see more disruptive technology, no matter if you call it 6G or anything, more disruptive technology, I would say close to 2032, 2030, I don't know, anytime in the next decade. I'll be retired by this time. But that's what I don't know. But I do know that the only path for us to navigate through the intelligent world that we're all talking about and all of those great opportunities for countries and companies to upgrade their capability, to have a better position on the ICT leadership map, I think the only way is, I think the cornerstone is 5G, and the next milestone is 5.5G. So 5.5G or 5G Advanced is the hope, actually, that we keep on upgrading this capability so that we can capture a lot of business opportunity that will help us all. So that will be incrementally happening over the next 3 or 4 years, and it will have a tremendous effect, and we will sense that effect mainly on industries, digitalization, and then also for consumers and homes. So that will come naturally, and we all know that, and it will get us there.
Excellent.
Okay.
That's a good answer. 6G. I'm going to start applying the I don't know answer. It's far too early. Far too early. And
yeah,
Chetan,
I can add on.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Winston. Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Because like at the beginning, I mentioned that the users and the governments are the drivers for the 5G, and I think they will be the drivers for the 6G as well. You know, for the individual users, right? It's obvious. You know, they have this insatiable demand for better digital experience. So I'm pretty sure once they taste the 6G, they will ask for 6G. And more importantly, you know, I think the government recognizes the importance of future networks. So 6Gs are already in the talk of the sovereign funds, surprisingly. You know, the leading one is Japan's sovereign fund, believe it or not. You know, the Japan government, you know, probably felt they are late to the game. So they set up a government vehicle, and they started with 6G to begin with. And interestingly, the U.S. is going to a similar direction. You know, there's a not kind of well-known sovereign investment vehicle in Washington, D.C. called the DFC, International Direct Financing Corporation, DFC. You know, it provides global project financing, and for some reason they also made the announcement during the pandemic that they gonna support 6G research and development. You know, I don't know what's the follow-up story there, but you know, it's an indication that all the advanced economies, right? They realize the importance of the next generation networks, so they're already thinking about 6G now.
Yeah, it's always great, fascinating to see how countries start positioning themselves for every iteration. It's very interesting.
Yeah, but there are two things, Alejandro. No, I'm sorry, just over 5 seconds. But there are two things we know that to start to have good or promising 6G, if I will. Number one is that keep on having a global unified standard for the wireless technology. So that's the key. That has been the strength of 5G and 5G Advanced, and it should also stay as one global integration ecosystem for 6G. And number two, of course, is for government to keep on licensing spectrum in the right way. We're talking about 6 gigahertz or whatever. So that's in the global perspective. So keep on doing the spectrum in a very nice, organized, productive way. So these two things, I think, will guarantee that the research and development will stay. And it's going to be a good exercise from all countries in the world to excel their research and development.
Yeah. Well, let me get this question in, because I think it goes well with what Chetan you were talking about before, what the role of those operators is when we look at 5G and industrial 5G. We have a question specifically around capex and opex. So, how should operators think about capex and opex in the enterprise 5G cycle? So, how does that factor in as they become a part of this, these deployments?
Sure. So there is a direct correlation between capex and capex, opex, and revenue. And so if your strategy is changing to more towards industrial applications and services, your capex and opex must follow. Otherwise, there's going to be a gap. And so I think the operators who are actively going after the industrial opportunity are shifting their capex and opex budgets to industrial infrastructure and things that matter to the industrial complex. And so while the traditional 5G or cellular network is table stakes and you have to invest accordingly, but you have to also start to think about how do you invest in things that matter to the enterprise more. And so your allocation of how you put the capex and opex budget on industrial side versus the traditional network, the mix has to change. And also some of the revenues that you generate from industrial have to flow back into the cycle as well for further investment and R&D. And so I think at the higher point is the allocation should mirror what you expect from the industrial revenue side and revenue streams. If it doesn't, then it will fall apart.
Yeah, sure. All right, I think we have time here for one more. We have I know, Mohammed, perhaps for you here, you talked about some of these successful installations from 5G perspective. Are there any more that you can share? I have a question here. Any specific example of an exemplary manufacturing system installed today? So maybe if you had to choose one that you think is kind of the gold standard of 5G as you've seen it, what would that be? I'll put you on the spot here.
Well, it depends on what perspective. That's a good question. So it depends on what perspective. Is that going to be from the size perspective, or from the diversified services perspective, or from how interesting the scenario is? Or so I mentioned things about mine and manufacturing, like a media company. There is also an auto company, auto parts company called IKD in China. Well, the key thing about other two companies is that they manufacture parts. So they depend on the flexibility of the product line on how to reset it up in a very short period of time, short, lead time. So basically that 5G helped them a lot, and you can see the production line. I've seen it going kind of like a game, like, in tracks and stuff, because there was no cables, and still you can connect that with 5G. So that was interesting. But one thing, it is not as big as manufacturing, but I liked it. In some of the shorelines, there are no connectivity, no fiber, not even a place to put a 5G site. So in China, in one of the shorelines, they constructed like few base stations for low band to cover the ocean, about 50 kilometers down the oceans. All of those boats, like fishing boats and stuff, they are lacking connectivity. And you can imagine what are the innovative applications they do if you get connectivity, 5G connectivity in boats and stuff. So they got offshore, like, how wind, to predict the wind power, and, to tell those how some of those boats and fishermen, they really doing kind of broadcasting, or for e-commerce down from the boat, how they can connect to each other. So to me, I think the key thing that I would imagine in 5G or 5G advance is how you connect the sky in the drones, and the ocean in the boats, and the land on enterprises and people, and how those will be an integrated thing together, adding a lot of values. So still we are discovering new services, actually, that every time it amazes us. I didn't mention the power grids. China Southern Power Grid Company. Oh man, they do things like crazy. If you see that environment and you go among, transformers and stuff, the sound is really bad and the electromagnetic wave, and you have this robot going to fix a thing and discover things. That's really also interesting. So a lot of interesting stuff. We need a whole day to discuss.
I know. Yeah, I was going to say, I think we've scratched the surface here, and sadly, I can see that we're getting the proverbial hook around the neck to wrap things up here. But thank you, guys, so much for your time today. Thanks for persevering through some connection issues, Winston and Mohammed, Chetan. Always great to speak with you, and I look forward to a lot more conversations in future. And to you, of course, our folks watching today. So I'm going to turn it back to Joan. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for attending this fierce wireless webinar and submitting so many excellent questions. Special thanks to our amazing speakers for participating and sharing their passion, and to Huawei Technologies for presenting today's webinar. A recorded version of this webinar will be available for you to access within 24 hours using the same audience link that was sent to you earlier. Thank you again for joining. We look forward to seeing you at future events.